Hi, I'm Alice, the Fabric Ninja, and today we're making a bib for the Happy Baby Revolution carrier. This carrier does inward facing and forward facing, so that top edge becomes a prime area for drooling, sucking, and just basically getting gross. And although the carrier can absolutely go through the wash, sometimes it's nice to be able to wash something small and not the whole carrier, because these bibs are easy to just throw in with your regular laundry, wash and dry them as you would with anything else. You can even have a couple so you can just trade out between them when that baby is definitely chewing on that top edge. To make this Drool bib, you are going to need the instructions, which include the pattern. The instructions give a step-by-step tutorial of absolutely everything you need to do, but so will this video. If you have any questions, make sure to stop by the Fabric Ninja Sewing Circle so I can help you out, or just send me a message yourself. You are going to need a outside and a lining fabric. I'm going to be making this reversible, so both of these fabrics will be showing in the end. You need something for the center that's absorbent. This happens to be Zorb, which is by the company Wazoodle, but you can just use cotton batting, flannel, terry cloth, an old washcloth, something that's going to absorb the drool. That's the key. You have the option to also add something that's waterproof, like PUL, also called PUL. And it's polyurethane laminate fabric that would just go inside, and that would make it so no drool could get to your carrier. But it's really just an option, and I'm not going to be doing it on this one. You need a chunk of elastic. If you have little pieces left over from making masks, those will do just fine. You can use anything that's kind of vaguely thin. So 1/4 inch or less will work great. And then you will need some snaps and a way to set them. So this bib needs size 20 cam snaps, but we're in luck that is absolutely the most common size. So it's likely if you have snaps at all, they are that size. Depending on the era of your revolution, you may need studs or you may need sockets. So that's something you're going to have to check out on your carrier. Open up the zipper on the front of the Revolution and you will see 3 snaps. Whatever you put on your bib actually needs to be able to connect to those.
And will be the same part that's used on the hood.
If you are a maker, meaning you're selling these, you'll probably want to get double-sided snaps. So they have a stud on one side and a socket on the other. They're called prong studs. And you're just going to make a double row of snaps so that no matter what era of revolution your customers have, your bib's going to work. If you're making this for yourself and maybe you want to trade out for a different revolution color at some point, do the same thing. So now that we have all the things we need to make our bib, let's get this pattern ready and cut out. First thing we need to do is get our pattern put together. So here are our pattern pieces. It's just 2 pages. So it's probably not worth trying to use your projector or get a full-size printout because there's only 2 pages that you have to put together. All we do is overlap these crosshairs and it will be perfectly put together. I'm using a light box here, but you can also use a flashlight, a window, or turn your cell phone on a white screen and put it underneath. All of these will work. So we have our pattern here, and the next thing we need to do is actually check to make sure that it was printed the right size. Yeah, maybe you should have done that first, but here we are. So looking at that, it should be exactly the right size, and it is. If yours is not quite the right size, I highly recommend that you try to figure out what's going on. It probably is because you printed from your web browser. You do need to download Adobe Reader for the best results on any PDF pattern. So let's take a moment to just look at our pattern and see all the information. You may notice there's a lot of stuff written on here, and that's because patterns are basically instructions for the entire project. So if you come across a pattern and it at least doesn't tell you your seam allowance on here, yikes. Let's just do a quick review. We have these two arrows that face this edge. This is a place on the fold, cut on the fold, place unfolded fabric. It's set a million different ways, but it means that your fabric is going to be 2 layers folded, and you're going to place this line here right along that folded edge. And then you're not going to cut there because this is going to open up and be a whole nother side. I have a whole video about how to cut on the fold if that wasn't quite clear, and of course we're going to do it in a moment. So hopefully that will help out. We have an arrow here. The arrow points up just so you know, if you have directional fabric, where it needs to head, where the top is. Down here we have marks for our snaps. You can mark these when you cut things out, or you can mark them later at the end. Here is where we're going to have our elastic loops, and it even tells you the size, so you don't even have to get back in your pattern. Our seam allowance is 3/8 of an inch. That's 1 centimeter for our metric friends. And it tells us how much we need to cut of everything. Cut on fold, 1 outside, 1 lining, and 1 absorbent. And then we have this kind of weird line here. It says approximate location of fold over top. Well, remember this whole thing folds over that top edge. So this is the only part that's going to show on the bib. So if you have a design element that you really want to show up, like I am using this bus fabric or the ambulances and taxis, I'm going to probably want to try to get a row of these to work with that line so they all show up over the edge. It's not a lot of real estate, and so I wanted you to know exactly where everything's going to be so you can place your fabric in the most opportune way. Okay, I've got my stuff ironed and it's all smooth and happy now. So let's get these cut out. I've already folded it back along the edge, so I have a nice edge here. If your edge is not crisp enough for you, you can always finger press it, stick it back on the iron, or whatever works. Everyone has their own way of working, so go with it. I am currently looking for my clips. Da, 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 da. So, you need to get this edge right along the edge of that fold. If it's off, your piece is going to be really big because this is going to double the amount of bigness that you add. If it's like this, it's going to be small. So you need to do your best to keep that right along the edge. I'm not a huge clip lover, but I love clips for keeping things right along the fold because I can lay it down, pin it there with my finger, and then slide that clip right in so I know it is perfectly on the fold. As for the rest, you can use scissors to cut it out, you can pin it in place, you can use a rotary cutter. I do suggest that you at least add a pin to this corner because inevitably it's going to try to creep away from you. Make sure to not put your pins over where you're cutting and wrecking your beautiful scissors. Okay, we have our first piece cut out, and I'm just gonna do a quick moment to explain that cut on the fold again. Remember, it's on a fold of fabric, but I did not cut here because when we're done cutting, this is our piece. Now we need to repeat cutting on the fold with our other fabric and our absorbent fabric. Cutting montage. Zorb does not have a right way up, so you can cut it in any different angle you want. 1 outside and 1 lining, and cut 1 absorbent on fold. There we go. We have all of our pieces cut now. Seeing that our next step is to do elastic, let's get those cut. We're gonna have a 5.5 inch piece of elastic, and then 2 4.5 inch pieces. So the next step is to attach these elastics to 1 layer of our fabric. Technically the lining, but because this is reversible, it's all the same difference here. Let me see if they'll show better on one of these versus the other. Yeah, equally horrific, but I guess I'll pick the one that's slightly less busy. Okay, so you have two pieces that are the same length, and you have one piece that's longer. The longer piece goes in the center, and the shorter pieces go here. You're going to be making a loop. Because my elastic is so thin, I am just going to kind of tie a knot and make a loop pretty near the end. So that's going to go there. And then I'm going to do the other two over here. Let's not put a knot in this and see if we can get it to stay. And then I'm just going to clip it right where it goes, which is the end here. And these two don't want to take knots for some reason, and you may have a similar problem with your cord. So I'm going to show you how to make that work too. So just do a quick clip and stick them into place, which is over here in this general area. Now we are going to actually be sewing these to the lining fabric. So before anything is together, we're going to sew these into the seam allowance. So sewing elastic can be kind of ugly. You got to go through it a number of times, make sure it's really secure. Oftentimes sewing machines absolutely hate sewing over elastic. They get loopy bottoms, and you can help that by turning your tension all the way up while you're sewing over the elastic. But basically, sometimes elastic makes a mess. And we don't want our bib to look a mess, so we're going to hide all the dirty work inside. Okay, we're at the sewing machine now, and I have some crazy color threads going on here. They don't match my project, but all this is going to be on the inside, so we're going to use them anyway so you can see. Now we are going to be sewing these elastics, which you can barely see, onto my fabric. Now note, the elastic is on the fabric. It's not sticking out this way, which is what it will look like in the end. Right now it needs to be inside our fabric so that when we sew the pieces together, it ends up on the outside. Otherwise, it's going to end up in crazy places. It is very easy to have difficulty sewing elastics in. So one of the things to do is to turn your tension all the way up, like 9 or whatever your sewing machine has. And then you're going to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And then you're going to pull on them to see if they're going to stay. And those stay. Awesome. And it may look a little raggedy. It may even look a little pinched where everything's going on. The seam allowance when you sew is going to be here. And so everything that's crazy and kind of mucked up about this is all going to be hidden, which is the entire goal. So we have a seam allowance that's going here. So I prefer to set these slightly off of the edge just so that they don't get caught in the seam allowance later. There we go. We have the 3 pieces of elastic sewn in place. Even though you can't see them because they're black, they are absolutely here. So now let's get this layered up for sewing. First, our absorbent layer. Pardon the sparkles. Craft herpes, whatever you wish to call them. Then we're going to put on our piece that has the elastic loops. And then facing downward, we have our last piece, you can call it outside, the other fabric. So you're going to match up all of these edges, remembering that Zorb has a way of growing. So no matter what, your Zorb is probably going to end up a little bit bigger than you started with. But it's not structural, so it's nothing to worry about. So line up everything. Do whatever you do to hold layers together. I tend to pin the corners because I really want them to stay still or move around. And I want you to take a moment to check those elastics and shove them in. Don't let them be hanging out here and across the seam. Stick these in from the edge. There we go. Now we are going to sew around the whole thing, leaving a gap here to turn it right side out. In the last step, we messed with our tension on our sewing machine. So it's a good idea to do a little test, a little piece of fabric that you run through your machine just to make sure that your machine is actually working and has decent tension. So never be afraid to do a sample. Here's my sample. Even I'm doing it. So I'm starting on the bottom. You can see because all the cars are facing up that way. And I am starting kind of off center from the middle because this is where my opening is going to be. This is where I'm going to turn everything through. So now that I get done wiggling my body and the camera and everything else, I'm going to do a back stitch and sew. You can either sew off the end. I'll do that this time. When you sew off the end, you just go off. You lift up your presser foot. You reposition it. Note, you want to follow the seam allowance on the edge of the fabric. If your absorbent material is sticking over the edge, follow the fabric. Remember, the absorbent material is going to grow. That's what it does. Then you do that and make sure this thread that gets caught when you turn the corner, make sure that goes through the center, and then you'll be gold. So that's one way of doing it, actually just sewing off the end. And now I'm going to show you how to turn the corner instead of sewing off of it. What you do is pivot. So you get to where you want to go. You stop with your needle down and you turn the whole thing. So I have my elastic right here. I can feel it. So now I know I'm going to sew across the ends, but the elastic is already secure. So I don't have to worry about it. I just need to go slowly to make sure it went over it without any problems. Now that we're on the bottom straightaway, I need to leave an opening here for my turning. I'm going to need a couple inches, so there we go. We've sewn all the way around our bib. We have our absorbent fabric on that side, and we have an opening here, which is where we'll be turning everything. Next, we get to do some trimming and clipping to make everything turn easier. I'm going to flip to the other side because the first thing we're doing is actually trimming this absorbent material out of the seam allowance. I am using duck billed applique scissors. These are Ginger Tula Pink, also makes a beautiful set. And I just find them really easy to cut along the line. You can absolutely do it with regular scissors. There's no reason you can't do that. I just really like these. So right here, I managed to cut the threads. So before we flip this, I'm gonna need to go re-sew that small section. So the goal here is to cut the absorbent material out of the seam allowance without cutting your stitching line. Okay, I've re-sewn that small area that I managed to muck up when I was clipping the absorbent material out, but all of this is gone now, which means all this bulk is gone. It's going to be so much nicer of a turn having that gone. Now we have to clip the corners. So each one of these corners we're going to clip diagonally to reduce bulk. Where the two corners come together, that point, you do not want to clip that. But what about these elastics? You've got a point there. We need to be very careful when we come to these points with the elastics. So here, when I cut across the corner, I really wasn't bugging the elastic because the elastic is a little bit this way. So on our other side here, the elastic is slightly closer, but it's still possible to clip, and then I'll just kind of clip next to it. That'll be fine. But this is the top. How do we do this? Well, we actually can just clip here and here, and then take out these little triangle pieces. And that will allow this seam to be able to turn and move even while that elastic is being held in place. On this bib, we kind of have curves, we kind of don't. There's kind of a slight curve on these two edges. If I am to tell you how to do things properly, I am going to tell you to make 2 clips on those curves. Those curves are barely curves. Don't worry about it. But I want you to know that you can do that. And if when you flip it the other way, if you're having any straining along these edges and it's not laying smooth, those clips are totally needed. So it's time to turn the whole thing right side out. You're gonna reach between the 2 layers of fabric all the way to the top point and push it through. So we have our elastic here. I personally wouldn't pull on the elastic, but you could. And then I'm just gonna work everything through here. If that hole is too small, it will probably break a couple of stitches and tell you that. So we still have these corners poking in. You need to poke these corners out. And if they're not getting as crisp as you want them, you may need to go in and trim a little more closely, or figure out if there's something that's causing your corners to not be as crisp as you want. Here we go. We have our bib. It has been turned, it has been ironed, and right here at the bottom we still have an opening. And I am currently using some of this stuff to stick those 2 edges together. But when you top stitch around the whole thing, these edges are going to be stuck together anyway. So our next step is top stitching around the entire thing. Then it's time for snaps. Then we're done. This is a pretty easy project, as I said. Here we go. Okay, we're ready to do our top stitching. I have a 1/4 inch foot on, which works great. I can just put the edge of this along the edge of my fabric. But, I mean, you guys know I like doing things as easily as possible, right? So I'm going to switch out to this foot. It's clear, so it's going to be super exciting for you to see it. But it has this kind of curve underneath, and that curve is going to literally sit right along this edge and make it like super fantastically simple to get a perfectly straight edge, because it's just going to ride the edge. This is a cording foot. You could probably also use an adjustable foot like this for like a blind hem stitch and just adjust your guide so it can ride the edge. All the top stitching is now done. We can get right up here and see that. The bottom crossed is done, and the hole here is all closed. If this was not closed, you'll need to go over this again with another line of stitching or do some hand sewing. So our next step is the snaps. So get your pattern back out if you didn't mark where things go to start with. And that's okay if you didn't, it's not a big deal. One of the easy ways to mark snaps is to take the awl that you're going to need for the snaps anyway and poke a hole. The one here is right along the edge, so you don't really need to do that. And now you're going to line everything up. But remember, you actually already sewed off this seam allowance, so your snaps are going to be closer to the edge now, and I'll fold this back so you can see. There we go. So if you're going to mark them later, you do need to remember that that seam allowance has already been sewn off, and then you just need to mark your snaps in whatever way you prefer and whatever way shows up on your fabric. You can also just measure, because as mentioned here, the snaps are 4 inches apart. So you can get out your ruler and be like, okay, awesome. Now I stick this one here, and I know that this snap is going to go right there. If your bib is not reversible, you're going to put your marks here. Your caps go on the fabric, the fashion fabric side, and your studs or sockets are going to go on the lining. If you are making this reversible, you are going to offset from these marks. So these are your vertical marks, and you're going to put one above it and one below it. But you still need everything to be 4 inches apart so that it still fits your carrier. So if you are making your bib able to be used on any era of revolution, you need to be using pronged studs, and you're going to do the stud facing one way here, and then you'll have a socket here, and on the other side it will be the reverse because you're using these. So there we go, final product. Down here at the bottom I have a row of studs and then a row of sockets. I'll flip it over. A row of sockets and a row of studs. That's how awesome those pronged snaps are. And it means that no matter what era of Happy Baby Revolution you have, this bib will fit into either of them. Pretty amazing. To put this bib on your carrier, unzip your Happy Baby and snap this onto the hood snaps. Flip it over the top edge, and then on the inside of your carrier there are some snaps. You just snap through these 2 loops here, or when you're using narrow position and these 2 sides come together, you can snap through this loop here to keep everything in place. And yes, you've noticed it's upside down here, right? Yep, that's because it's on the inside. So don't panic when you see that. It's still right side up on the outside and looking great. If you'd like to make one of these yourself, just pop over to fabricninja.com, go to shop, and then Happy Baby. It will have all the Happy Baby patterns in one place so you can find everything you need. You can also get the free suck pad patterns at fabricninja.com/free pattern, or it'll have a link to them in the shop section for Happy Baby as well. I have 2 different shapes of hoods, several shapes of suck pads, and there will be soon a slipcover for the Happy Baby original. It may already be out when this video comes out. Thank you for sewing with me. I'm Alice the Fabric Ninja. Have a wonderful day. It's time to make a Happy Baby Revolution bib.